and welcome to episode 231 of Retro Encounter RPG Fans podcast of usually game journals of games 2 years or older, but we're here with a special topic today. We are here to talk about mental health, self-care, and gaming. So I have here with me Lucy Gray. Hello. Alana Hagues.
Hey.
Joe Padilla.
Howdy.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hi there.
And we're all very, very excited to talk about this topic. We've had a lot of discussion amongst ourselves and amongst the staff for a long time. So why don't we get started by, we're going to get into some specific games, and we're going to mostly have a discussion here. But we brought up ideas like self-care, stress, trauma, and grief, and various characters you've identified with. So we're going to kind of look at it from those angles and discuss some specific games. But first, why don't we go around and kind of say why we were drawn to this topic? Why don't we start with you, Alana?
I mean, I think I always played video games because I thought I was trying to get away from something. Not kind of necessarily as a mental health escape or things like that. That's a really poor way of putting it, but I just played them because I enjoyed playing them. And it wasn't really until I got to my 20s where I thought, oh, you know what? I want to go home and do this. I had a really bad day. I want to play, I don't know, Guilty Gear or Soul Calibur or something, just beat something up a little bit and just let out some stress, or even something a little bit more complex, I guess we'll get into it, but if I've had a really bad day and I play something and it makes me feel really good, then I'm like, oh wow, okay, there's actually a really good reason that I actually sit down and play these things. So I think as I've gotten older, I guess my mental health has been a bit rockier personally throughout my 20s, and so I find myself more drawn to characters and stories that are really good at either being kind or talking a character or walking them through a process like grief or trying to get through PTSD or something, or just any kind of mental health issue. And it really helps me connect with a video game more than maybe just I'm going to save the world, I'm going to kill God. And then, I just think that as I've grown up to understand myself a little bit more and understand why I play games, I think that mental health, I think it's getting better. It's an interesting time in video games because you have that mix between indie developers who have all of the, they can take risks, they can explore mental psyche and issues and acts of kindness in different ways, whereas you've got big budget games which are not as good at doing it. They're getting better, but they don't want to take those risks quite yet. And I think it's an interesting time to watch both of them develop.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, they have a pretty set formula, and they have specific returns, and specific things they're looking for a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I definitely think you are not alone in that, especially talking about kind of the development process. And as we age, we have more responsibilities. Mm-hmm. We have learned a little bit more what we need when we're in those times of lower mental health or having a tough time. So yeah, that's great. How about you, Lucy?
Well, I mean, mental health is a big part of what I do beyond the site. I'm a special education teacher, and actually just got certified as a mental health first aid responder for my school. And the interesting thing for me is I deal with a lot of kids in crisis, and one of the big things that often is a topic that we use as a bridge for them to start talking to me is video games. Besides the fact they go, what, you're a teacher and you play video games? What? For a lot of kids and for a lot of people, video games are a way of not having to deal with their own problems for a while and deal with set problems that they can easily solve. And games don't look at people judgmentally. They're very non-judgmental. They aren't going to treat you any differently than they're going to treat somebody else. And for me in particular, video games are a way for helping with my own mental health. When things start seeming really overwhelming, it's sometimes fun to just pop up Stardew and go, okay, I'm going to play a day. I can do my crops. That's going to get me through the day. And just that little bit helps me go a little bit farther and feel a little more in control of my life, which is a big thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'd say that I agree with that personally. One of the two main reasons I play, I think, I will add though that I do feel judged when I play the Dark Souls games.
At least I'm just judging myself. I mean, that's something like...
Yeah, I think I'll turn it around and make you judge yourself. But...
Do you also feel judged playing certain routes in Undertale?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Way more than others. That's true. All right. And we'll get into specific games shortly. But how about you, Joe?
Yeah, so I was really interested in this because I think part of it is me wanting to understand what's a healthy way to engage with video games. Because I think at some times in my life, I've been like, yes, this is good. This has been a positive experience that is helping me get through life in a quote unquote healthy way. And there are times where I think that I'm using video games to distract myself from things that are more difficult to face. And so I'm really I'm really interested in the times where positive experiences of engagement are really what I'm trying to look for with games. And I think it's so important with mental health because there are some games that I think have been really helpful in kind of helping me piece together certain aspects of my life or to connect more with the world around me. So I think it's a really important topic, and I think it's something that also doesn't get the credit that it deserves because of kind of how people view people who play games. There's this kind of put on of childishness or something like that goes along with games a lot of the time. And I think it's completely unfair to say that. So changing that narrative and presenting them as these holistic experiences, regardless of what exactly they are, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a large range of experiences, and hopefully we're going to talk about some really good ones today. But also, it's a very personal thing, too, finding that balance. What amounts of what games have seemed to help me? What do I need? What do I not need? So that's great. All right. How about you, Zach?
My answer echoes a lot of what really everyone has said. I don't deal with mental health issues in my profession quite as much as Lucy does, but I am a teacher, and it's amazing to me how often I see students who struggle to connect and struggle to engage, on their Switch playing Breath of the Wild. And if I sit down and have a conversation with them, and the way that I'm able to engage with them as a result, and also just the way that you can see them working through issues by playing. Breath of the Wild is the one I think of because I have like 5 students this year who play Breath of the Wild all the time, which is a good choice, I think. But for me too, as a person who struggles with my own mental health issues and the ideas of accomplishment, for me, I always think about the idea that there are certain games in my life that have come by at just the right time. And I will talk about Nier Automata more later. Shocker, I'm going to talk about Nier Automata. But the idea of the right game and the right time for me, and the way that different ways of experiencing narratives and sort of immersing myself in them has helped me process trauma or grief or difficulty has been really important for me. So I agree with what Joe said about the idea of games being a childish exercise, when in fact I think that they help me deal with the most difficult things, even more than, I'm an English teacher, even more than books sometimes.
Wow, that says a lot. Okay, well, thank you all for sharing that. Before we move on and maybe talk about some of these experiences and specific games, I just have a few I call them disclaimers in the show notes, but a few things to mention. The first of which is none of what we're going to say is meant as medical advice. If, we're going to be talking about something that helped us personally. So if you, listeners, are having a difficult time, please reach out and find professionals or professional resources that work for you. Also, everyone's different, so what works for one of us may not necessarily work for other people. 2, everything in moderation. Gaming provides some great benefits, but it shouldn't interfere with your life activities, your life, and that can be very important to keep in mind in the context of mental health. We've already kind of hinted at, sometimes it's the right time and this is helpful, but how much is too much, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. 3, this is a resource that Lucy added. If you're in a crisis situation and you are having thoughts of suicide or know someone who is, please remember that the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255, or anytime you can text 741-741. Okay. Having said that, does anybody have a specific game they want to discuss first, or a specific experience?
Well, I kind of want to bring back to what Zach was talking about in his thing, because I found that Breath of the Wild is, just as he said, it's one of those games that a lot of people seem to focus back on as one of those. I found for a lot of folks, including myself, that Breath of the Wild was really a wonderful space to explore and has been an easy way to connect with people, but also that because you are sort of exploring the world and you can do as you want, it's a really nice space to there are small tasks you can do and not have to worry about the bigger picture. I know at least 2 of my students who spent all of their time doing the itty bitty teeny tiny quests on finding Korok seeds, and we're like, main quest? What main quest? I just like chopping down trees.
I think there's a real shift to that, isn't there? Breath of the Wild is a really good example, and I think any open world game, I think nowadays games have a tendency to allow you to take things at your own pace. So you have those open worlds where you can just, I'm a big fan of taking pictures in video games and sharing them online at the moment. And to make the time to do that, to appreciate the scenery, like you would go outside for a walk and take pictures and, I don't know, take a picnic. I don't know what people do now. You do the same, like you can do the same thing in a video game, like Breath of the Wild again is a fantastic example because you've got like a different weather cycles, you've got day and night, you've got different creatures, you've got the dragons that fly around. So every time you go somewhere, you can stop and see something different, whether it's what's around you. And it's just, and the music as well works really well together because it's just that moment where you can sit and breathe. And sometimes you just leave the screen on, or you pause it and you let things play through, and it's just a release. And I think, again, like something in particular with RPGs that I really latch onto is all those itty bitty side quests that you can do. Like, no, I will collect all of those like coins or Koroks or whatever. And it makes me feel, and I think we'll come back to this with probably another game, and Lucy's already mentioned Stardew Valley, like the minutiae and the kind of day-to-day mundane stuff, quote unquote, that you would do in everyday life. It helps me to, again, organize my life and make me feel like I'm doing something structured in something open world, because open world games are really scary. And I think giving it structure through some little side quests or something like that, it really helps me to tackle it in a kind of piece by piece way, which in turn makes me think, oh, this problem's really big. How can I tackle it in ways A, B, C, D, or break it up in another way? So yeah, I know I'm latching onto that a little bit, but I think open worlds are a really nice way, especially just relaxing in them. I'd love to go and live in Hyrule and Breath of the Wild, even if it is an apocalypse, technically, Yeah. It's a pretty one.
It's a beautiful environment, and all of you just mentioned a couple of things that are really kind of hitting home with me. So I'm studying to take my boards as an occupational therapist, and you just mentioned 2 things that are very, very notable to me. One, the environment. You guys are all talking about being able to enjoy that and share it with other people for Breath of the Wild, and also task analysis, sort of the idea that there are some big problems or some big stories, some large goals, save the world, that's pretty daunting, but a lot of these games that we have found useful, I think, have that goal that will give you a real sense of accomplishment, the kind of big goal, but then also something on the macro level so that you can build toward that goal and feel accomplished, or break the bigger tasks down.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I realize how important side quests are until I really feel engaged with them. Like, you can throw all the fetch quests in the world at me, but you stick a collecting side quest in front of me and I am gone for 40, 50 hours, regardless of what game it is. Like, collectathon platformers. You stick the strawberries in Celeste in front of me, I won't get every damn strawberry, even if it takes me like 4 or 5 playthroughs.
Did you really? That's amazing.
Nearly.
I did not do that at all.
No. I managed to get to it without assist mode. That was the only thing that mattered to me. Was I beat the game without assist mode.
I got to the DLC without assist mode, and then once I got to the DLC, I was like, I'm going to try to assist with this. But yeah, I did not try to get the strawberries because I'm not very good at platformers, and that is a very, very difficult platformer.
Yeah. It's why I play a lot of platformers, because those 90s platformers where you collect all the gems or the dragons or the eggs or the things or the jiggies, they just give me that structure that I really like. Like, oh, how many do I need to get to open this door? Oh, another 20? That's fine. I can do that. And it's just a nice goal-based structure and makes everything feel a bit more digestible, I think.
I think something that goes kind of into Celeste and also touches a bit on why I put the Souls games in our Google Doc is that in these worlds, in these immersive worlds, because it's basically like intelligent design, like there are these crafted quests and things like that. There's kind of always a guarantee that someone has made something for you to stumble on. And I think everyone kind of in some fashion, everyone has this sense of exploration in them. They're always looking to find something, discover something. And when you're out in the physical world, that doesn't always happen, because sometimes there's an indistinct twig next to a tree, and that's it. Like, that's all there is. And in a game like The Witcher, in Souls games, you go down a wrong path, and that path isn't actually wrong because something quite interesting has just happened. You've triggered some sort of response from this crafted world.
Yeah, and I think that can sometimes shift our perspective of real life a little bit, which can be helpful.
Yeah, it's like guaranteed. It's like kind of guaranteed satisfaction for your wonder and exploration.
Yeah, you get a sense of reward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, my next question is, what's everyone's go-to game for self-care? When you say, all right, I need to take care of myself, I'm going to play a game.
Well, I mean, this is going up after the 20th of March, so I'm going to say Animal Crossing New Horizons right now.
I've heard that from a lot of people.
But I guess on a similar vein, any kind of farming sim or Stardew Valley in particular, and for similar reasons I've already said. But I think another thing that makes Stardew Valley stand out for me is how nice it is. And it's not a horrible game. Nothing horrible happens in it. Everybody has got every single character in that game. You can build, there's basically, for those who don't know, you move into a farm that was owned by your grandfather and you move next to this town. The farm's a bit rough and the townsfolk are a bit, oh, hey, welcome, you're a new farmer. You can build relationships with all of the characters in this town. I think there's over 20 of them. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think I remember 28 in the introductions to
20. That sounds about right, yeah. So you can have romantic relationships with half of them, regardless of their gender and yours, and but you can also build up friendships with every single person in that village, and every single person in that village has a different mountain to climb or obstacle, no matter how big or small it is. I mean, you have things like Shane's alcoholism and other issues that he has, and you have Elliot's desire to want to be a writer, and he struggles with sometimes getting his ideas down on paper. So you have all different problems, big and small, personal, and you can deal with them and talk to them and, you know, build up this really nice and kind relationship. And there's nobody has ever mocked for having any of their problems, even you, and it's lovely to work through. Like, I'm always a focuser on the farming side of things, but I'm always pleasantly surprised when I think, oh, you know what? I'm going to go give Harvey a coffee today. And then he pulls me to one side and we have like a cutscene and he talks me through something. I'm like, oh, this is really good. Like, it's really heartwarming and nice to see and thoughtful, and like so much of Stardew Valley comes together. Like, Harvest Moon's really great for the kind of getting married and having like kids and building up the farm, but Stardew Valley deals with the human side of things a lot better or a lot more rounded, I would say. Like, the characters all feel real and very relatable, and it's nice to make you feel like, I don't want to say it like this, but like, you're helping people and it helps you in return. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like that, because I know it's not really the most ideal way of putting it, but it's nice to feel like that you're not alone in having those problems, and because you've seen someone else or you've helped them, you might be able to go away and take something away from it, maybe. I'm not sure, but yeah, Stardew Valley is my tonic, basically. Like, I will go to it if I've had a rubbish day, and I will probably accidentally play it for about 6 hours as well. So.
No, I completely agree with that. And again, Stardew Valley is also one of my go-to games. But two things that I want to jump off on what you said was that particularly one, that Stardew Valley deals with real human problems and makes them solvable. And for a lot of people who are dealing with things that aren't solvable in their life, that can be a really big help. You know, in some way you're getting steps going towards a solution. The game's very open-ended, and for some of these problems, and you don't see the full resolution, but you get people to a better place, which I think...
I'm thinking of Shane.
Yes, I'm thinking of Shane.
Yeah.
Exactly. Where, you know, he's not 100% better, but at the same time, you know, if you get to the top cutscene...
Yeah, you can see his trajectory.
You see his trajectory. And also that Stardew Valley, you know, doesn't put pressure on you to play it a certain way, so that I feel like, particularly for me, like, the first time I played it, I did do the romance route, but every single playthrough since, I've actually like said, nope, not going to do the romance route. I'm going to be friends with everybody, but I'm not going to. I like being independent, and it's nice that you can play it in so many different ways, and that, you know, even though it is, you know, each day can take you about 20 minutes you're not feeling like you have to do a certain thing each and every day. That there's variations, there are ways that you can play that make it a little more customizable to yourself than, say, Harvest Moon was. And I think it's really important for me in particular is that, yeah, I can play it for 6 hours and be like, oh my god, but at the same time, if I only can play it for, like, I'm in the midst of writing 6 gazillion reports, I can play it for 20 minutes, turn it off and go, okay, that was a nice break, and then get back into my real life feeling a little bit better, but not feeling bad that I only had 20 minutes to play it.
Right, yeah, I completely agree with that. It's nice to just... There's so many things that we cover as a site that you cannot just play for 20 minutes and go, oh, I've done now there. Like, everything requires heavy concentration, whereas this is just like... Yeah, it's just nice.
Yeah, and it's nice that it's in those little discrete blocks of time.
I can get a lot done in 20 minutes as well.
It's true. And I want to echo what Lucy said. That Stardew Valley is definitely a game that gives you kind of a sense of agency. Like, there's some guidance. Like, you can kind of pick ways to get bonuses for certain things, certain paths, like fishing, get more treasure while fishing, or get more from crab pots. You know, you can kind of tailor it a little bit, but at the same time, you're still free to choose. It's a good amount of guidance, I would say, and you can kind of choose what you want to focus on. I've been making clothes with the sewing machine in the latest patch a lot.
It's so good.
Meanwhile, I've been going down to the mines and finding all the pepperexes I can possibly find.
Yes!
And it also makes it easy to share with other people. Like, I've noticed a few friends of mine that play it, when that update came out, we all discovered different things first and shared them with each other. Like, oh, did you know that this character lets you grow tea? No, I didn't know that. Here, did you know you get a cool dinosaur hat if you put this thing in the sewing machine?
What?
What?
If you put a dinosaur egg in the sewing machine, you get a dinosaur hat. You're welcome, everyone.
I just got a dinosaur egg and I hatched it, though.
But you'll get more.
That's true. I will now.
I've never played Stardew Valley, so I am very confused about all this. I understand how the game works and such, and there's the extent of my knowledge on it is that there's a chapter in Jason Schreier's Blood, Sweat, and Pixels that covers Eric Baroni's development. Eric Baroni?
I think Lauren, I don't know, yeah.
His development of Stardew Valley, and talks about his mental health as well, and like how he managed to make it and everything. Really, yeah. Really, that's my favorite chapter in that book. And if you haven't read that book, highly recommend it.
Yeah, me too. It's a good pick, actually.
Yeah, sounds like a good resource.
Yeah. For me, I don't have a game that I go to for self-care, which but for me, a lot of what kind of gives me gratification is sticking with something and like working through it from beginning to end in a certain period of time. And so I do this with books, with games, and with like TV shows and such. Is that if I start something, I just work my way. I work my way through it, and it's very rare that I'll drop a book or show or a game, because for me, it's it feels like progress. It feels like progress to me, because a lot of times in life, I feel like I can't progress in some fashion in something that I'm working on, whether that's in a career, whether that's in like friendships and relationships, whether that's in just understanding more about myself. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm kind of at a roadblock here. And so having that feeling that I started this and I made it through it, and now I can put it back on my shelf and look back fondly on it, is kind of it's really powerful for me. Like on days where I complete a game or a book, like for the next 24 hours, my mood is generally just really good. I feel in a really good spot, and I'm reflecting on it. I'm thinking about it a lot, and that really helps me get through some really difficult days.
Well, that's great, and it's good that you've kind of learned that that's a good habit for you.
Yeah, I think so. There's sometimes where I'm like rushing to finish a game because I'm like, give me that serotonin or whatever, like give me that dopamine hit, you know. And yeah, that is how I played. That's how I played Wild Arms 3. I would not recommend that.
It's a long game to do that with. Yeah.
What's that?
It's a long game to do that with.
Oh yeah, it was. Anyway, but yeah, everyone kind of goes it in a different way, and so for some people it's a game, and for some people it's kind of a feeling they get from kind of regardless of what it could be.
Yeah, I mean, to jump off your point a little bit about taking your time and playing at your own pace and getting from beginning to end, I think Metroidvanias are really good at that because, again, you're not really pushed to go in a particular direction. And then you don't have to, there's no need to rush that game. There's no need to rush Symphony of the Night because, what if I go into this crack, or what if I go down this path? And it goes back to your Soulsborne point as well, the twig by the tree. If you go back somewhere, there's going to be something really interesting there to discover. And I really like just scouring over these maps time and time again just to see what I've missed and where I could possibly go. And I always take my time on these kinds of games because I just enjoy filling up the map so much and then completing it. There's such a gratification of coming off of any Castlevania game or any Metroidvania and saying, you have 200% of the map. And I'm just yes, that's what I want. I'm going to play it again and do exactly the same thing. And it's why would you do that? Because I love doing it. That's why. It just makes me feel so good that I can go back and re-explore and, I'll notice the same thing, sure, but it just is nice to get that gratification.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of exploration and that completion that Joe was talking about.
Mm.
And I think kind of also I think it's a really good point, and it with the Souls games, it's kind of going back to this certainty in your efforts, because I could put a lot of work into and it's difficult to think about these things sometimes, but I'm I can put a lot of work into kind of gunning for this job that I really want, and then it doesn't work out, and you're and you're just really upset about it. But with Souls games, they're very difficult, and I'm not the most I don't have great twitch reflexes, or I'm not the quickest draw or something like that. But I know that if I keep trying, or if I level up a character more or something like that, I will eventually get it, and that there will be forward momentum, where at other points in life, you can put a lot of work into something and it just doesn't work out for you. And that's life, and that's fine. But it's nice to have something where you're certain to progress in some way.
Yeah, you're never discouraged from trying anything, are you? Even though some bosses are easier with certain classes, and there's always a way around it, I think, with anything in Soulsborne games.
Yeah, and I like the way there's more than one way to solve a problem, usually. There's some great examples of using the environment to get through difficult parts of the map in Souls games, and one of the other main things I've heard said about them is, yeah, it's frustrating, but it's frustrating to that kind of sweet spot where you're proud of yourself when you figure it out. It's not too much.
It's fair.
Yeah, and you don't always get that in life.
No, not at all.
I'm sort of interesting in sort of contrast to all four of you, I think. For me, I'd say that my comfort food game is Dragon Quest. And there are a lot of reasons for it. I kind of feel like, for me, I want to have a curated experience when I'm struggling with something. I feel like there's a lot of things sort of moving on around me, and there are a lot of decisions I have to make, or a lot of different things that I have to deal with. And if I play Dragon Quest, I know that a couple of things are going to happen. One is, it's not going to be overly difficult or challenging if I put the time in. As Joe was saying, that is helpful for me. But also, it's going to be sort of a light, breezy, sort of delightful experience. So that's why I go back to those games so often, because I just want something that is going to just feel nice and not make me make a ton of decisions. And maybe it's because I was sort of raised on very linear experiences, but there's something very comforting about that for me, as opposed to an open world game. If I'm really struggling and I'm already overwhelmed, I'm oh, I have all these choices and I'm already overwhelmed, and so it makes me more overwhelmed. Whereas with something like Dragon Quest, I feel like I can know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid point, and I think that speaks to video games as a medium in an interesting way, that you can kind of, based on what you think you need, pick that sort of experience.
Dragon Quest is so warm as well. Like, I look at Dragon Quest games and I just smile sometimes. It's great.
It's true. The slimes.
Yeah.
They're so cute. So, going back, I'm kind of curious, and if anyone wants to continue talking about self-care types of experiences, that's fine. But that leads me to kind of wonder, if you're stressed, do you typically seek out some of those kind of warmer feeling games, some of those fuzzy experiences, or do you want to something a little bit more like a fighting game where you can kind of get things out? What are your preferences there?
I mean, for me, it just sort of depends. I mentioned Nier Automata earlier, and the idea of mentioning that as a self-care game or as like something where I'm stressed, it might seem outrageous to people, but my worldview in general, and I guess I'm maybe giving some things away about myself here, is very dark in general. In terms of when I think about trying to seek meaning in things and seeking meaning in philosophy or religion or whatever. And I think that game looks that idea squarely in the face. It says like, hey, I see you. I see the way you think. And hey, there's still hope. And so for me, it just depends. Sometimes Dragon Quest is that thing that I want to do. Or if I'm having a particularly dark moment, I actually want something that says like, hey, I acknowledge that. And let's try to see what you can do about that.
Right. Yeah. One thing I always come back to about like identity and an identity crisis, I suppose, which I guess isn't really, it is tangential. I always think about the Not Alone sequence from Final Fantasy IX, where Zidane is having a mental crisis if he doesn't know who he is, and all his friends come together and to kind of help him, and he pushes them away. And it's not until Dagger comes along and like helps him that he realizes how selfish he's being. And it's that moment where he's like, no, hang on a minute, I can do this because I've got everybody around me. And that was one, even as a kid, like that was one of the things that made me think, oh my God, friends are important and they will listen to you and they'll help you. A true friend will come and help you. And it's like, sometimes I will go directly to those things that I am scared about and will play them and to try and understand how I'm thinking. I'm trying to think of, this is maybe more coincidental than actually like being something I directly ran into, but and maybe not a slight warning or anything, but potentially if anyone else has gone through something similar. A couple of summers ago, my dad passed away and I was going through, I hadn't really grieved and I hadn't really processed it properly. So I was playing Persona 3 around the same time for the first time. And I got to October, and anyone who's played Persona 3 knows what happens in October to a certain character. Yeah. And I think the bit that hit me most, was Akihiko after spoilers. It was the kind of thing where he was standing alone in the gym and he just broke down. Like, Akihiko is pretty solid as a character. He's kind of not macho, but he's definitely like the stereotypical male character, and he shows this like wavering vulnerability, and the way he dealt with that death like made me tick like, oh my God, it kind of taught me how to grieve a little bit. And this is me like 21, 22. And I was like, yeah, it just hit me. Like, it really brought it out to me. And I had to like come away from the game. And I remember quite specifically thinking about that moment and thinking about how I dealt with the death in my own family. And I was like, I didn't react like that. Was that right? And I'm like, no, it's the way you deal with things. And then it hit me like weeks later and I just cried and cried and cried about it. And I was like, no, I needed that. I needed to see that bit. I needed to see that bit of vulnerability in another character to realize that, you can grieve however you want, but you will have those days where you have to grieve. You have to just let something go and let it all out. And so, like, even though it was accidental, it was like a really important thing for me to know that sometimes it's worth going head on to these problems and going, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, I feel this, or I understand that, or wait, how do I process this? And then something will come along and will be like, this is how we've done it, or this is how we've interpreted this situation. How do you do it? Does this help me? I read it like, does this help me at all? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. Usually it gives me a little bit more insight, but like, I think that death scene and the timeliness of it, it's not an insensitive word, but if you know what I mean, like, it just helped me in that particular moment. So sometimes I do go out and deliberately seek out, like, there's a thing, isn't there, where like if you and your friends are having a bad day, you will put on a really soppy Netflix film, we'll get ice cream and cry together. And I feel like it's a really similar thing for me with video games. Like I will, oh my God, I'm having a really bad time. I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. Why don't you watch your favorite character die and mourn over them or something like really terrible? And I'm just like, do you know what? I needed that release. It helps me sometimes.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to people occasionally seeking out like a sad book or a sad movie.
Yeah. I wouldn't maybe necessarily recommend it always, but sometimes it does help me. Like, I'm not very good at showing my emotions around certain people. So, like, sometimes I have to do it in private, and sometimes I'm rubbish at doing it in private. But at least if I'm using this thing to help a little bit, then I feel a little bit better, even if maybe it's not the right answer all the time. I think it's worth it. It benefits me in a way, certain things.
Yeah, and I would also point out that I really liked that scene in Persona 3. I also liked that in Persona 4, it dealt with death in a different way, where it talked about, with one of the social links with Naoki Konishi, the younger brother of one of the characters who dies in the beginning. It talks about how he struggles with it and how people have these expectations of how he's supposed to be, right, and how he's supposed to be, and everybody sort of how his own emotions about how people are treating him and how confused he is about the whole situation really resonated with me when I was playing it at the time, because my grandmother had recently passed, and that it was this weird situation for me, and it really resonated with me, and it felt nice that they were showing that sometimes you don't have all the answers, and that you can get frustrated, and you can feel really you can feel angry at loss, and that's still okay.
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually. I remember feeling similarly. I hadn't been through anything in particular. I think I lost my grandfather a long time before that. But I remember thinking, I didn't know whether it was because I was so young at the time, like I was 9 or 10, but like I didn't really cry over any of it. And it's those kinds of scenes that make you think there's not a right way to do it. You'll have a time when you do grieve or you do feel sad or angry and things, but that social link, I remember, I don't know whether I maxed it out, I can't remember, but I remember being pretty gripped by it, definitely, for those reasons.
Yeah, all of those are really powerful reminders that grief is an individual process.
They're kind of two games that I played semi-recently that I think were really helpful with kind of processing things that were going on in life. One is Grease, the kind of artsy platformer, which I didn't know. I just had seen the art style, and I knew generally what it looked like and how it played going into it. And at the time, I was having a really difficult time with opening up to others, and kind of like at the time I was in the process of like coming out as transgender to people in my life, but I wasn't public about it, and that game kind of deals with grief in this very in this way of it's difficult to explain, but it is kind of like saying goodbye to yourself in the past, or it might be another person. And that really kind of helped me with that process, and with kind of accepting a past that I didn't feel was no longer adequate or was actually my experience. And a lot of the game is about it's recoloring your world and refining a voice that you had lost, or perhaps that hadn't even been there before. And so like a week and a half after I played that game, I like had publicly come out, and that was really really powerful, really helpful to me. And I wasn't expecting that going into this game. I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty.
I did not know that was about that at all, actually. Well, that was the reading that you took from that, because I'm looking at Greece. I look at Greece in the same way that you probably did, in that it is a gorgeous game that's probably quite meditative, and it's not fast paced, is it? Or
no,
Yeah.
It's only about a 4 or 5 hour game,
Okay.
but no, it is rather, there isn't any dialogue really, and it's just it is rather meditative.
Yeah.
And with that, like shortly after that, I was like, okay, I have this, so I'm open about this. Now I want to form more close relationships with people and like let people in more. Now that they know this about me, like let people in to my life. And a game that helped me with that was The World Ends With You.
Ooh, interesting.
Which through its gameplay mechanics, which if you're playing that in its original form on DS, the combat is kind of a headache, but it's because it's all about connection. You can't win fights if you're just trying to use the bottom screen and using one character. It really communicates that communication and synchronization with another person is really difficult, but it's so rewarding. And that kind of the title of the game says it all. And the world, if you create something so insular that other people won't be able to penetrate that, the world does end with you. It's all kind of, it's a room that you live in and don't leave. But the more you can trust others and expand that world out, you can beat the final boss of the game. You can make inroads in life and truly start living with other people in a way.
Sounds like a great message. It's got me thinking of a few more games that function that way. One of them is actually Journey, I think. I mean, I know you can get through that yourself, but I think it was a much more eye-opening experience for me just because of the way they introduce working with other people and the way you can surprisingly be helped by others.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm also thinking of my recent first MMO experience in Final Fantasy XIV. I would not have gotten very far without other people, and I really enjoyed.
No, thanks, Hilary.
Shout out.
No way we take down that first turn of the coil without each other.
That's a good point, though, because I think MMOs over the 2000s built up quite a big reputation of being fairly inaccessible and fairly like expert heavy. And there were definitely people who were there to help you. And you would need people to help you get through certain things. But there was definitely this stigma that put me off of getting into them throughout the 2000s.
Me too.
Like, in Final Fantasy XIV, I played it as well for a bit. And I played it with friends at the time. And they basically they didn't carry me through the game, but they were like, oh, well, let me know when you're on and we'll help you and we'll do this and we'll do that. We always want to do stuff with you. And are you going to run roulettes? Oh, we'll help you as well. It's fine. They were always there. And like, it was always my choice if I wanted them to come along or not. And yeah, I absolutely wouldn't have gotten through Heaven's Ward as quick as I did. I mean, this was still talking like 300-400 hours probably by the time I'd gotten to where I was. But like, yeah, if I hadn't had them, I would have been totally clueless and really lost. So, and they make you feel like a team player as well. Like the FC that I was a part of, we were all pretty close knit. We would get together. We had bonding ceremonies and stuff like that, and took stupid pictures and, you know, did stupid poses and
seasonal events.
Yeah, exactly. People. So yeah, I think Final Fantasy XIV is a really good example because I think that is one of the RPGs that MMOs that has kind of broken that stigma, which is a bad stigma to have, and it's probably untrue, unfortunately, perpetrated by like online forums and things. But it's you don't really hear that about Final Fantasy XIV. It's dense, but it's very beginner friendly with the beginners hall and things like that, and the characters who have like the leaf sapling next to them, or it's like you can identify who a new player is, but you never see anybody going up to new players like, you know, and taunting them or bullying them or anything like that. And you've also got the mentors as well, which is also really helpful. So yeah.
I think they have a pretty good community system, which is important, because if connection is one of the things you look for, especially when you're stressed, you can definitely find it there. One experience with a random, more veteran player was actually them coming up to my friend and I and being like, "Oh, you're new. Here, have a minion.
Aww.
Let me know if you need help." It was very sweet.
That's very nice.
Cute.
That happened when I first started the game too, but I got overwhelmed and I logged off.
No, it is pretty daunting.
It is indeed.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, here's this, and we can help you go through quests and stuff like that." And I was like, "Okay, thank you, but I'm I just logged off." And then the person saw me in the world like a week later, and they were like, "Hey, what, you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just got really overwhelmed, but like really, you guys are very sweet. Thank you."
But that's another thing about it. Like, you can log off. You can take it at your own pace. I'm going more slowly, I know, than some other people in our group.
That's true, yeah. That might be me.
Okay, so before the next big topic area that I'm curious about is if anyone has specific characters they identify with in RPGs for mental health or self-care purposes. But before that, does anyone have any other games they want to mention?
I mean, I feel like Undertale has to be brought up, doesn't it, in some way? It's been a few years since I've played it properly, but I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about it with Trails in the Sky and Estelle being a very positive influence and a character who, as brash as she is always nice and doing things for the right and the good. And Undertale is a game that is nice, or can be nice, and promotes being nice. You know, the way you're supposed to play it is by doing one playthrough by not really killing a lot or not killing anything, ideally, and then you beat the game again. And then, if you wish, you can go through it and kill everything. And it really makes you feel that. And it is the biggest, like, I cried throughout the whole of the like pacifist route, because it's just so well written and the characters are so well rounded in that game, and it's so like it promotes being nice. Like at the end of the day, you know, the monsters and the humans don't get on because of this one horrible incident that happened, and you're a human being nice to all of these monsters, and it's a reparation of relationships between two different races and two different locations and things like that. But like, if you play the genocide route after the pacifist route, God, it rips your heart out so badly. Like, oh my goodness.
Has anybody here actually done that?
I wasn't able to.
Oh, I no way. No way.
I've got to get the completion, you know? Like, talk about completion. I was really interested in it, and I think when Rob Fennell wrote our review and kind of hinted towards how different it was, if you did it that way, and I was really stunned and interested to see how it worked, and it works. And not only does it work, it remembers. So you beat Genocide Run, you can never, ever, ever, ever do a pacifist run ever again. And it will always remember. Flowey at the beginning will always remind you of what you did. And that is on my Steam account at some point. So, you know, I'll live with the shame and carry on. But I think it was just interesting for me to see how it dealt with like the being nice to being nasty. But yeah, Undertale's got some really good characters who go again through some really good like character arcs and relationships. So yeah,
that game does a really beautiful job of illustrating the two groups, and it is really heartwarming seeing all these really colorful characters and their reactions to you if you go through the first time, like you said, you know, as a pacifist. Just if you show that you are willing to, be their friend, just how they react to that is so beautiful. It's so sweet. And then the way it can just completely change, and how I guess you're in full control of that.
Yeah, I don't think enough video games promote being nice. I think when you're given the option to be good, like say the Mass Effect Paragon Renegade thing, people are always drawn to Renegade, but even when you're a Paragon, it's not like you're the virtue of innocence, you've done everything perfectly. Oh, I'm going to buy you a box of chocolates today. Oh, my neighbor needs some help, let me go and help them, and things like that. There's always like a certain kind of heroism about them, or like something supernatural about them, whereas there are not many video games that make you come across as just like a normal, nice person. And I know Undertale is not like the perfect example, because you are a human in a group of monsters, and you do some pretty insane things in that game, even on the passive history. There is no way you'd be able to get through some of that game in real life with the bizarre things that happen. But I think that it's nice to have a human kind perception of a character in a video game, rather than them being nice and being revered for being like a guardian or a good person. Like, Stardew Valley again, you can help people. Then, yeah.
And you do get appreciated. You get that like 500 gold occasionally from Mayor Lewis, but it never gets to the point of like, you are the guardian of Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
And that's all, but it's also you bring up a good point that games aren't real life. So in some ways, that when we are dealing with things that are so overwhelming and such, it's not a bad thing to have something where you are appreciated for something and you feel like you are making a difference. Because in times of stress, for some people, having that feeling of accomplishment and feeling that appreciation is what they need.
Yeah, it's very interesting how with these games we've discussed, you can access those extremes if you need to. If you really, really need to vent, you can go complete renegade. If you need to feel appreciated, you can be a paragon. So do we have any specific characters in mind? I know we mentioned some sequences like in Final Fantasy IX. I actually have one.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Cecil in Final Fantasy IV, actually. I mean, he's a pretty cheesy example, but
yeah,
not cheesy. You take that back.
I am. This is really funny because I'm playing through Final Fantasy IV right now.
Oh.
I am an anxious sort of person. I'm a very self-doubting sort of person. So to watch him question himself and be a Dark Knight, and then eventually accept himself and become a paladin and help everyone around him, it's just very helpful and empowering to me to think of that.
That is a really good one. It's like, it's one of the first real examples, isn't it, I think, of that kind of trope or storytelling. I found Cecil really interesting the first time I played through Final Fantasy IV. It's definitely not cheesy. Like, it's definitely a sense of like, he's overcome it, and he's like, he knows he's doing wrong in the beginning as well. Like, he wants to right that wrong, and he eventually does by proving himself. So
yeah, it's a redemption story.
Yeah. And I think we kind of attracted to redemption arcs or even underdog stories at all times. So yeah, I don't think it's cheesy at all to relate to something like that.
Oh, no.
I am now racking my brain.
Yeah, same here.
I always feel like I take parts from different characters and never wholly relate to
that's
singular.
Natural.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, this is not necessarily mental health related or even like totally character related at all, but when I played through Time Spinner a couple of years ago for a review, so this is not mental health related at all apparently, I feel like Linnaeus is one of the first characters to properly articulate how I feel about my sexuality, which is something I have also struggled with. And like, I'm not afraid, I knew what it was, but like, the media is not very good at portraying bisexual characters, and that always kind of eats away at me, and I'm always like, but I'm not like that. Does this mean I'm not that? You know, it always makes you doubt that you feel like you're attracted to people the way that you are, or however. I don't really think that bisexual is even the right label, quote unquote, but like, I know that I'm not. I know what I am. And Linnaeus comes along, and I think there's one scene, and you don't know anything about this beforehand, and someone's like, oh, you're into that? Or like, not judgmental, and they ask her something like, oh, so who would you rather go out with, or things like that. And Linnaeus is just like, I don't really care. I have no preference between men or women or whatever, and I don't really care. Or I can't remember the specific wording, but it was the kind of just, yeah, I'm this, and that was it. And I was like, okay, now somebody gets it. Like, in 2018, somebody is wording how I would word my own opinion of, like, it helped me, like, understand why I felt the way that I did, because I'm not really, like, it's an important thing, and I tell people if they ever are curious, or they ask, but it's not something that I've ever really addressed properly or like come to terms with until that point. Like, it was always kind of either a joke or a kind of a like, oh, I'm this, but you know, it's not a big deal kind of thing. But and this is just kind of like put it into perspective for me, and like, actually it's, I guess it's what kids say, like, you want to see you want to see you represented in media, and that was my moment where I was like, oh my god, the representation is there for me. And I know I'm a cis female, so it's, you know, obviously I don't have as many issues as any like other particular people, but it was still kind of gratifying that I had that kind of recognition in that way. And I would imagine that other people probably feel similarly about the way, like, when they find a character in particular that they relate to, when they get the representation they absolutely deserve. So it helped a lot with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly valid point to bring up in a discussion about self-care, mental health, and games, is that, you know, having some representation, being able to think about your identity and seeing things in a light that you value, will contribute positively.
Yeah. I think it's even more important in a world where we, as a site, we generally are attracted to JRPGs, and forward-thinking representation, or even like current-thinking representation, is not exactly a strength of the genre. So, I mean, if you look at something like Time Spinner, where it just like looks, I mean, it doesn't even look it in the face. It's just like they mention it, and then you just like keep moving. And I think that means a lot to probably a lot of people who are engaging with that game. And I think that probably brought some attention to that game positively too, which also shows that, hey, representation can also bring you more eyes, which I wish more developers would recognize.
Yeah, it brings a community of people together. There are nice groups of people who want that, and then they find this thing, and then they bond over it, and then they give each other suggestions for other things, and it is really good to see. And I totally agree, like, representation matters, and I get really sick and tired of people who tell me otherwise, and it's like, no, it definitely matters. Like,
there's only one group of people who tell you representation doesn't matter, so
yeah, I know. I'm aware.
For me, a character that I've started kind of more recently to kind of identify with in a way is Aqua from Kingdom Hearts. That's good. Yeah. And like the way that she is this sort of she's this sort of, in things like Birth by Sleep, she's this sort of stern, like kind of motherly figure in some sort of way. And like, because of her actions and like the general wheels of the plot, she's brought to very literally a very dark place that she has to kind of wade through alone for years. And that's something that really resonated with me, because I felt that a lot of times I would push away actually dealing with my mental health and actually kind of looking it in the face, or as Aqua does, kind of looking at it in the mirror. And instead I would push that to the side and instead focus on just helping other people through their mental health crises, their struggles in life. And of course, like cooperation and solidarity among people is so important, but there needs to be that element of self-care. And so when I was playing these games and seeing Aqua go through this, it kind of felt like she was the game doesn't blame her for being in that place, in this like basically realm of darkness in some way, but she kind of understands that she's there because of actions that she's taken in her life. And it was really strange. I wasn't expecting Kingdom Hearts to kind of get that right, but I felt it did, and maybe it wasn't even that they tried to do that. I think that's just kind of what I'm picking up from it. But that's the thing with art, though, right? It isn't necessarily about what the artist explicitly sought out to make, but it's how you interact with it. And I know with being a musician, when I write songs, during that process, I'm writing them for myself. It's some sort of cathartic moment. But once it's released, or once other people are hearing it, it's not really mine anymore. It's however someone else wants to take it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Aqua's really good. Kingdom Hearts is not subtle about any of its themes at all, but I think Aqua is extremely good. Yes, she is literally in this realm of darkness, but you've seen her go from this motherly character to being a Keyblade master to trying to save her friends and failing. You see that entire arc of her going right to the top and then falling and then going into this dark place. And as literal as it is, I think Aqua is probably the best written character in Kingdom Hearts in the entire series, because they managed to do something really meaningful with her arc, and she gets a tiny bit of spotlight in Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm disappointed with how they use her.
It still makes the moment that she is out the most cathartic. You know what I mean? I think that even the limited screen time she gets is still the best part of Kingdom Hearts 3.
Exactly, yeah. So I think she's a really well-written female character as well in a game series that is notoriously terrible with Kairi.
Yes.
So, yeah. So I think she's a real standout, and a reason that a lot of people have been drawn to Aqua as a character, because she, you do see that arc, you see her fall and you see her get back up, and it's as easy as it is to see, it's really easy to relate to, because everybody's been through that. It's something that everybody can go through, irrespective of when you play it or whatever. So I'm a big fan of Aqua. I think she's great.
Well, we have Night in the Woods here, and I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on it. I played it for a few hours, and that game felt too real to me. It felt,
I've heard that, yeah.
The characters felt too much like myself and people I've grown up with. And the town, I had to, that was one of the past 2, I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah. Of the past 2 years, that's one of the few games that I've set down, because I was I don't think I'm ready to engage with this yet. And I think that's something too, is that a game might not hit you a game, you might not be ready to engage with something that you feel is really difficult, and that's totally okay, and that's totally understandable, and maybe it'll hit you at another point, and maybe you won't come back to it. Yep. But it's important that these experiences and these stories are being told regardless.
Yeah, it is, because it might be really helpful for someone. But I've heard that particularly about Night in the Woods too, is that it hits you hard. You have to watch your character make some big mistakes, and very relatable. Character makes some big mistakes, and that can be really, really difficult.
It can.
Yeah.
Very early on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Very early on, the character, she's hasn't played her bass in a while, and she tries to pick it up, and you kind of mess it up because you yourself haven't played the bass in the game, so you don't know the mechanics. And as someone who used to play bass, I was like, please don't do this to me.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, I think in a similar way, that's why, like, there's not many characters like it, but when you come across like writer or poet characters or things like that, characters who want to write books or things, or want to go on adventures and write them down, like, I always really struggle with that because I'm like, shoot, I didn't do this either. This is where I fell down. And I'm like, no, I can't. I can't accept. Yeah, I've really struggled to get through them. Just because it's something I recognize in myself. And actually, Night in the Woods, I really want to play, but I know because I've seen some of the writing and I've seen how, like, you know, it's one of those games like Undertale. It's kind of memed to death a little bit, but there's a reason, because the writing is so human and those characters are so real that people like Joe have, you know, played literally a couple of hours and gone, oh my god, like, you know, you've been through those experiences, like right down to the bass playing kind of thing, that it's too real. And sometimes we need that, but we need to be ready for that, I think.
Yeah, we just need to be conscious of, you know, what we need. So one of the last things that I kind of put on the docket to talk about is something about games that I've found personally really useful, that isn't exactly so much in the writing or plot itself, and that's just the way games can create a really good sensory environment. If you're stressed or going through something, some of my go-tos for that, I really like Ico Shadow of the Colossus, Last Guardian. You have cute animal friends, and the environment is just, it's minimalistic, but it's very, very breathtaking, and I found that those are things that I'm kind of drawn to if I just need to put myself at a more of an even keel. And so I encourage everyone to kind of maybe think about that when they're gaming a little bit. Think about, like, do I want a game that has a lot of green and history? Do I need something kind of motivating? Do I want something with upbeat music?
Yeah, I guess, that's why I'm probably drawn to the mana games, or anything with extremely expressive pixel art, or anything with really soft pastel colors. Like, I just find those things endearing and warm, and like, I love the forest. Is it the Great Forest in Secret of Mana, where it's the 4 seasons? And I would spend hours and hours grinding, just going between the seasons, because I just found it so nice. Like, there's no other reason other than, and I'd also like grind up my magic there because that menu is so glitchy and it's so easy to do. But it's a really nice place to do it. And like, I guess it's becoming more conscious now, but something I tend to bring up, even if it's brief, whenever I write a review, are the colors, because I always really am attracted to that kind of thing in video games. And like, I always really like expressive character models and soft color palettes and things, and I like it when colors are used to describe moods. And something I reviewed about a year and a bit ago, and really I should have talked about, is Florence, a mobile game which I believe is now on Switch, about a girl and she's basically 25, 26, and she meets a boy and falls in love with him, and they move in together, and in the space of an hour, like, they've been through their entire relationship course. And Florence uses no dialogue, and it uses it uses your touch and your sense and your actions to do things. Like, you brush teeth by moving a toothbrush across the screen, or you like guide her across a path, and she's listening to music. And the color in that game is really well done, because the warmer scenes are either done in yellow or pink, and then you've got like the sad scenes where they're arguing or where she's crying, they're done in grey or blue, and the music changes. It's a dynamic soundtrack as well, so like, even though the tracks are separate, you can buy the soundtrack on vinyl, or you can go listen to it on Spotify or Bandcamp, which I recommend you do, because it's really, really beautiful. I think it's Kevin Parkin is the name of the composer. It changes, and like, it's only a piano and an acoustic guitar, but like, those two instruments a really subtle, and I'm a big fan of dynamic music anyway, but I love it when it changes in tone with a mood, not just a location. So like when it drops or when it gets slower, you really feel it. And I played Florence not long after I broke up from a long relationship, and it hit me very, very hard. Like, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I feel like this. But it ends on a really positive note. And it's like, you know, just as anybody, you know, one relationship is part of your life and you both move on and kind of things. And it's never the end. Like, a bad thing or a bad day, a bad relationship, it's never the end. And even though it might feel like it at the time, it uses art and color and music to kind of take you through that journey, but also take you to the end and let you know that there are bright things there. You know, I think it ends on like a warmer, yellowy kind of screen with Florence getting a new job or moving away. I can't quite remember, but I find experiences like that extremely good because yellow's a nice color. I like colors very much and I enjoy looking at them. And I think, again, going back to Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana and the way that their color palettes are so appealing to me is just because they feel like fantasy worlds that I would want to live in, and like they're just cozy and they feel like places I would sit under one of those trees all day and just completely live my life away. And I'm always drawn to really nice backgrounds and synesthetic kind of visions like that. So yeah, I would say Mana's a good game to play if you want to like look at some good green scenery. And Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade is another one as well I would highly recommend because of how varied those locations are. Any of them, I would say, like they've all got very different worlds, and even though they can be extremely stressful with their mechanics and how much is going on, you can absolutely slow down and not do anything and take in the visuals because they're all really stunning.
That with the music.
And the music of all three of them is so good. So yeah, music is also a massive part of it.
Yeah, and it's just a really cool idea that we can think about those choices and maybe pick a game based on how we're feeling.
And Joe's reference to Greece as well, actually, like coloring the world.
Yep.
I did not know that was what it was about, and now immediately I'm like, it looks so pretty, but it's also got meaning, and I like that. Again, you don't really see games that use color so explicitly and like in a meaningful way. Usually it's subtly, which I do really like, but that is a really nice way to kind of bring it to the forefront.
And I think you were going to say something, Lucy?
Oh, I was just going to add on another game that I actually didn't play. I watched other people play it, and it's been my game to go back to. Like, I've listened to the music constantly and just watched Let's Plays of The Outer Wilds because the music is just so comforting and like a warm blanket. And it's another game where, like, you die constantly, but that's not the bad thing. And you could do all these horrible, you could do all these things that end up with all sorts of terrible things happening, but it resets and you get to try it again, and it feels like nothing you're doing is that terrible.
It's errorless learning. You can mess up in whatever fantastic way you can think of. I remember one time I was actually playing with another one of our staff members, and we're listening and we hear our ship beeping, and I'm like, oh no, does that mean the ship is gonna... And he didn't catch on quite as fast as I did, and it turns out the ship exploded. Okay, well, good to know. I didn't even know that the ship had an alarm system when it's damaged.
Well, I thought it was particularly fun because I didn't know that this certain musical sequence meant the sun was going to sequence. The sun was going to explode, and I just thought it was the best music ever. And I'd come and listen to it, like, oh, we're dead. I'm like, huh?
But then it was really funny to watch this, like, because as we were telling Lucy about this game, and as she was seeing bits and pieces of it, she didn't quite get the context of this music, but the people actually playing the game, that music would start, and be like, oh no, we're out of time. And Lucy was just sort of like, what? But then eventually she caught on to it. It's still a really, like, nice piece of music. But that's a game is a really good example of kind of getting wrapped up in the environment and being able to make mistakes without fear.
in terms of a sensory experience, the first thing that I think about is Final Fantasy VIII, but only very specifically. Only very specific parts of that game, because the rest of it stresses me out. But the Balam Garden and its music and how it just looks like nothing else that I've ever seen in terms of its architecture and everything. And so it just gives me this sort of like an alien hope, I guess, of like I can't even fathom a future like that, and that's what's so that's what I find so beautiful. And I kind of juxtapose that with Fisherman's Horizon.
Yeah, good yeah.
Which is which feels very religious. It feels very kind of in touch with the world around it. And the music just elevates that as well. And so I kind of wish that Final Fantasy was just Balam Garden and Fisherman's Horizon. But that's neither here nor there.
But you could still go to those specific spots, maybe if you need like a break or need to see either of those things.
Yeah, but then I'd have to use the battle system.
Not in the remaster, you don't.
That's true, yeah. That's true.
Actually, Final Fantasy VIII is a really weird one, because that game has so many different varied locations and they all feel so different. Like, who expected Esthar? Like, honest to God.
Oh my God, yeah.
What on earth? Like, Final Fantasy VIII is a weird game that I have a lot of love for, but I completely get that it's so bizarre and stressful is a really good word to use to describe it, because like, what the F is going on half the time? Like, it's I think that's a really cool comparison, actually. Fisherman's Horizon always makes me smile. I really like Timber as well, because that also feels a bit more down to earth than that. You've got like Dollet in the other big town at the end of Disc 1, which that feels like very normal. Like, that feels like a place I could go to now. I could get on the train and I would come out and be like, oh yeah, look, there's the Galbadia Hotel or things like that. And oh yeah, but then you've got like Balam Garden, which is a literal airship with a school on it. Like, what is going on?
Yep, there you have it.
I love FF8 though. It's so stupid.
Right. So, one of the other things we wanted to cover quickly is some concepts relating to mental health first aid that Lucy researched for us.
Important thing to note when we're talking about mental health is always to know that games and are great for self-care, but they don't replace important aspects of talking to professionals, making sure that you have support strategies in place. Games can be part of that, but they can't be your only piece. There are some great resources at the National Institute of Mental Health, as well as Mental Health First Aid. If you were at all interested in actually becoming certified in Mental Health First Aid, they actually offer classes that you can take to help one, recognize signs in others, and also to provide supports and strategies for others to reach professional resources. So those are just two options that are out there. But games are an important part of making sure for a lot of people that they can get through hard times and have that little extra bit of as Joe put it, dopamine to make it through the day and help you feel a little bit better about yourself. And that's sometimes all you need, but to also realize that there are other resources out there for you if you need them.
I think that's a very good point, a good starting place, because it is a process, and games can definitely be a powerful part of your toolkit, but it's important to realize that this is a big job, and it involves recognizing when you might be going through some hard times. It involves finding the correct resources for you, and time in a lot of cases too.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So, listeners, we also would like to hear from you. We'd like to encourage you, if you have specific games or experiences that you'd like to share, please let us know. You can email us at retro@rpgfan.com and share. We'd love to hear from you. And so I think we're just about at time. So does anybody have any other closing thoughts?
I don't think so, no. I think we've been pretty thorough, and of course, like, we're only one subset of people who play video games on RPG Fan and worldwide, and of course, like we've already said, like you've already said, people are more than encouraged to talk and let us know what they do and play or think, or how they experience video games and mental health, and how they deal with their own issues. You don't have to be personal. It just, like, let us know, and because talking is really good. I know some people find it really hard, but even, like, you can even email us anonymously or things like that if you want to. But yeah, I found it really eye-opening. I always do, and I always think to myself more like, I love sharing video game experiences, and the more I've played and the older I've gotten, the more talking about playing video games actually helps me. Like, it's nice to have a group of people. Most of my childhood, I didn't really have many friends who played video games, and now I've got, like, a big group of people, and then you just chip in and you ask them, oh, how's it going? Like, what are you playing? Oh, you're playing this? How are you finding it? And then if you know what they're playing and they're stuck, then you can help them out. And it's just nice to have a community. And I think even if I would find it hard that people wouldn't play video games and at least relate to something or find something that they find difficult nowadays. But, like, even if you don't, I think that people will find it really satisfying to talk to other people about the video games they play if they want to, if that's something they feel comfortable with. It's always nice to share experiences regardless of whether they are personal or, oh, I beat this boss the other day and did this. And it's always like, it's nice to share experiences.
You can share victories, you can commiserate, you can... Community is really important, and we want to keep that open for people who want to share.
Yeah. The important thing to also note is that you're not alone in this.
Yep.
There's always people who are wanting to hear from you, and that there's always somebody out there who's more than happy to talk to you.
Yeah, that's a good note to put things on. So let's go around and maybe say where everyone can be reached. Let's start with you, Joe.
So I'm on RPG Fan social media, so I'm one of the people who posts and will be replying to you. In terms of personal stuff, I changed my my kind of handles and stuff like that, so you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Discord as @EvaLeast.
Great. And how about you, Zach?
You can email me at zachw@rpgfan.com, or you can reach me on Discord at zachw.
Wonderful. All right. Lucy.
I am Jess Idris, JESIDRES at Twitter and Tumblr. And yeah.
Right. Alana?
I am at Alana Hagues on Twitter.
Great. And the best way to reach me, I'm Hilary Andreff. HilaryA@rpgfan.com, or I'm EPFire on Discord. And just as a matter of housekeeping, I want to talk. I mentioned the retro@rpgfan.com email. Please use that. We like feedback. Don't forget to rate us on your preferred podcasting platform. And in terms of upcoming episodes, we have 2 episodes upcoming on Soul Blazer later this month. I'm really excited about those.
Oh, yeah.
Other 3 coming in May. So.
Oh my god. That is a game we did not talk about that definitely hit some soft, like, some points.
Yeah, definitely.
Having never played them.
I haven't played it yet.
Yeah, no, I've not played it, but part of the course for Mother, it's hard sometimes, like, personally. God, it goes places.
That's a good description of that series.
It goes places.
It goes places.
Sometimes outer space is those spaces.
Well, thank you so much again, everyone, for joining in, and I hope that we'll make this an ongoing conversation, and I hope you all will continue to find games helpful and maybe found something meaningful here too. Thanks everyone. Good night and good luck.